So a comment I get a lot is, when am I learning OBL? So in this video, I hope to answer that and just show why I'm not learning OBL. So what is OBL? So usually to orient both the top and bottom layers, you do CO, you solve the corners first. Then you do EO, solving the edges, and that's how you orient both layers. But with OBL, you look at the top and bottom layers and orient them in one step. So as you can see, it's quite an efficient method and it's pretty good. Now, I don't know this method, so I might get some of the facts wrong, but I think there's around 90 or so cases, and the average slice count for the cases is around 3 or 4. If you compare that with CO-EO, CO usually takes around 2 slices, and the EO usually takes around 6 slices, making CO-EO around 8 slices. So OBL takes around 3 to 4 slices, CO-EO takes 8 slices. You're saving half the moves, which seems really nice. And learning it doesn't seem too difficult. It seems to be very similar to learning cube shape. For example, in cube shape, you reduce cases to scallop kite or scallop. It's very similar for OBL. You can reduce cases to this OBL or this OBL or this one, and you kind of build your knowledge from there. So yeah, this is a very good method. If you want to learn it, I'll leave the tutorial in the description by the North American champion. He's very good at this event. So yeah, OBL is really good, and we've seen so many good results with it recently. Especially Max Shaw's 5 average with OBL, which is crazy and unheard of, and probably impossible with just CO-EO. And I think out of the top 5 square runners right now, 4 of them use OBL, which just shows how dominant this method is and how good it is. So I guess that segues into the topic of this video. Why haven't I learned it yet? So to answer that, I'm mostly going to be explaining not why OBL is bad, because clearly OBL is really good, but more of just why OBL isn't for me. The first obvious reason is I'm kind of lazy. There's around 90 cases, which is a good amount, and recognizing OBL is definitely quite difficult and takes a lot of practice. For CO-EO, it's very simple, but for OBL, you have to recognize the exact patterns on each side, and there's a lot of cases that are pretty difficult to recognize. So that does contribute to why OBL is pretty hard to learn. Lots of different cases and recognition is pretty hard. So yeah, OBL being hard to learn is part of the reason, but I do know 2-out PBL, which is arguably more difficult, and also CSP, which is also arguably more difficult. So that's not really the full reason why I'm not learning OBL. The main reason why I'm not learning OBL is it changes a lot of my approach on solving square one. To illustrate that example, let me just show an example solve with my method, and then with OBL PBL. Here's an example solve with my method. Obviously I do CSP, and this is even, so it's good shield square. So I would solve it with slice U prime slice U prime slice. But because this is a 2-gen alg, I know the left side will be preserved. So this would stay white and this would stay black. So I guess that's pretty much what I predict for PCOP. But because I see this is black as well, what I could do is do a D prime beforehand. And now both of these black corners will be preserved for the rest of CO. And actually this black edge also for EO. Then we could do CS. For the last slice of CS, I look at this white piece, which would go down here. So I already know my entire CO at this point. I can kind of look ahead it. And I don't even need to predict CO from cube shape. I can just look ahead it. So slice U prime slice. From this last slice, I know these 2 whites will be on top. And for this slice, I know this white piece will go here. So 2 whites on here, 1 white here, and 1 white here. It's pretty obvious what the CO will be. And it's also helpful that I misaligned the bottom to get all black here. So I can go straight into CO without even pausing here. For the last slice of EO, I can tell that the white edge is here. So in the last slice, I notice I have 1, 1 here. So without looking down, I can immediately do a D. Now on to EO. I see there are a lot of blocks on the cube. If I did 1, 1, these 2 would switch, and then these 2 will switch. So on top I would get a B perm, I think. And then bottom will also be a B perm, you can tell from this block. Which is a good case, but if you know multiple 1-1 algs, you can do different things. For example, I know the other alg that switches these 2 and also switches these 2. And if you look at it, it gives you J on top and J on bottom, which is actually a lot better. There are also a lot of other 1-1 algs. There's also the 5 slicer like this, which gives you another PBL. But if I do the one that switches these 2, I get JJ with flip, which is really good. And I can solve it like this. Now for a solve with OBL PBL. First off, I do cube shape. This is odd. So just do this. Then do OBL here. And then I do PBL. And we're solved. So as you can see there, the OBL solve was quite quicker and had a lot less moves. But another thing you might notice is that there isn't too much to this solve. You do CS, you do OBL, then PBL. There's not as much look ahead. Actually, there's no look ahead. And there's not as much options that my other example solve had. And that's kind of my main issue with OBL PBL. When I started square one, this is how people solved it. First off, solve cube shape. Pause, then solve CO. Pause, now solve EO. Maybe look ahead a bit here to solve CP. Then pause again, then do EP. So the entire solve was pause, do an AUG, pause, do an AUG, and over again until it's solved. Which is partially why people hated square one back in the day, I think. Obviously hardware was bad back then, but square one was known as that event where it's all AUGs and that's it. One reason I got into square one is because I thought there was a lot that can be improved in square one. People weren't really looking ahead, which is something I thought would be really useful in square one. And there weren't as many creative solutions in square one. It's always a pretty straightforward solve, which I thought could also be improved. So that's why for PBL, I thought instead of doing CP, EP, why not do two AUGs that are more move efficient, which requires a bit of creativity in how you solve cases into other cases. So for here, you can force C into S and PN into P to get a nice PBL case. For CO, obviously CO is pretty bad. You're pausing and doing like two moves and pausing again. So to reduce the pause between CS and CO, I did PCOP. When you look at it for one slice for CO, like this, you can't really tell what the CO will be. If you know these two are black and this is white, you don't know if the white piece is going to be here or back. So the idea of PCOP is during inspection, find out what this piece is. And from the last slice, you can find out what these two pieces are. That way you can always look ahead and go straight into CO without any major pause. And that was the main idea with also predicting EO a little bit, just by looking ahead. So for this case, if I solve this CO, this edge always ends up here. So knowing that this left edge is white, and using the last slice, I can go straight into EO. So this is white, these two are white from the last slice, and the EO pause can be shorter too. Obviously for CO EO, back in the day, there was also OBL, but it really wasn't as common, but it still was a thing. But I just didn't think it would be that good. I thought recognition was too hard, and a few people did do OBL and never recognized that fast. In hindsight, obviously I was wrong, and OBL is so good these days, but I definitely did consider learning it back in like 2016. So yeah, those are some ways I tried to optimize square one by making the event less pausing and then doing an AUG and doing that over and over again, and having a bit more look ahead and a bit of creativity in how you solve it. But now with OBL PBL, I think it kind of returns back to that state, and I guess that's kind of expected by over optimizing this event. Every time you're just pausing, recognizing, and doing an AUG. There is definitely no look ahead with OBL PBL, and I don't think there's that much creativity. For every OBL, PBL, and CS, there's usually just one straightforward, obvious way to do it. Again, for PBLs, there's different ways to do PBLs. OBLs, you can do different angles, and same with CS. But there's generally one way to solve it, and one AUG you do. And if you look at finals of big competitions, I think the solutions of all the top square oneers are almost identical. And that's just because they're all getting the same CS, obviously. They're all getting the same OBL, so they're doing the same OBL AUG. And they're getting the same PBL, and they're doing the same PBL AUG. So the solutions just are all the same. And just from that, if I learn OBL PBL, I don't think I can compete with these people. A lot of people have a lot more time to dedicate to this event and are much more talented than me. So just by doing the same solution, I don't think I can really compete with how fast I recognize the cases and how fast they turn. Right now, OBL PBL, in my opinion, is pretty much no look ahead and all AUGs. I'm not saying it's going to be like that forever. I think there is some optimizations you can do with it. I think OBL prediction is very interesting, or even partial prediction. And just the idea of doing 2-look solves is pretty incredible compared to 3-look right now with OBL PBL. And I'm sure there's also more interesting ways you could do CS to influence better OBLs or OBLs to influence better PBLs. But I think all of that stuff's quite limited and hard with this method. So pretty much what I'm trying to say is OBL PBL is a good method, but I don't think I would enjoy it. It's just recognizing and doing algs, which in my opinion is a bit boring. Now, even though I am a competitive square one solver, I also like to have fun with the events I solve. For example, for 4x4, I don't use Yao. I actually use a method I kind of made, where instead of doing Yao for the centers and edges, I kind of just do F2L, but with 4x4, so F3L. So I make one center, like this, and I just start building F3L pairs like this, until I finish Yao, which is a kind of weird method. And in addition to doing this, I also do Olo parity avoidance, which is avoiding Olo parity. So for this F3L method, it's clearly pretty bad. The move count is higher than Yao, and there's more rotations like this, which can be more annoying. And I get clowned for using this method by a lot of people, which is understandable. It's a weird method. However, I enjoy this method. And yeah, I'm not world class, and maybe this method isn't the best, but I like the creativity in building these blocks. There's always a lot of nice solutions you can use, and also a lot of creative stuff. For example, you can do a lot of wide F moves here, which is not a common turn on 4x4. You can do slice moves, which are also not that common on 4x4. And one thing I'm working on is you can do side slice moves too, like that, to solve pairs, which is, I think, also pretty cool. So I think it's a pretty unique method, but obviously it might not be the best. And with this method also, it makes Olo parity avoidance a lot easier, which is also another reason I switched to it. And this is also a method that a lot of people said was really bad. I think when I was doing this method, very few people were really doing Olo parity avoidance, and I might have been the fastest OPA user for a little bit, not sure. But now, I think it's pretty clear that this method is pretty good, and we're seeing a lot of great results from Ari with this method. He uses Yao, so it's a bit different, and his tracing is also a bit different, but the idea of avoiding Olo parity is here to stay. And I'm very glad that I stood by that method for a while, and got to see how it's doing right now, and I think it'll be even more popular in the future. So the point is, being fast is cool, but I also enjoy unique methods that might not be what everyone else does, and also has some creativity and unique elements that are different from other people's solves. My method also isn't bad. I think it is still viable and competitive even today. Even though I have a larger move count, my pausing time in my solves, I think in theory should be less than other people, because I'm looking ahead for CO, EO, and predicting PBL as much as I can. And I've had a lot of pauseless solves where I pretty much turn the entire solve, which I think is pretty cool, and that's almost impossible with OBL PBL, just because it's so hard to look ahead with that method. And I don't think an OBL PBLer can ever really get a pauseless solve just because of how difficult it is. Because I can avoid some pauses, I can get some pretty competitive times in these big finals. For example, in Northeast Championships finals this year, most of you probably already know, I got the 4.45 square one single, which placed me first in North America at that time. And I got the fastest time of that group for that scramble, even though my turning is clearly slower. And the reason why is because I was able to look ahead CO during CS. So I went from cube shape to PBL with no pauses pretty much. And I think everyone else in that scramble paused for that CO. So just by avoiding that pause, I was able to have a huge advantage for that scramble. So yeah, my method is probably worse than OBL PBL, but I think it has some advantages. So yeah, I know I ranted a lot in this video. A lot of OBLers will probably dislike this video, but those are my true opinions on this topic. So enough of that. What is my future for square one now that I'm probably not gonna learn OBL? First off, I want to definitely get better look ahead. I think my look ahead sometimes is pretty good, but there's times where I'm still pausing a little bit. And if I'm still pausing for CO and EO, I may as well just learn OBL, so I feel like I can get rid of a lot of those pauses. So to get rid of the CO pause, I think something I can work on is learning full CO prediction, or predicting more pieces. Right now I usually just predict one piece, maybe two, but if I'm able to predict every corner, I think it'll make CO prediction a lot easier. Obviously it's pretty difficult, but that can reduce the slight pause I might have from hesitating. And then for EO, I think I could predict EO a bit better too. Most of the time I still do pause for EO just because it's a lot harder to look ahead EO during CO. However, if I get CO during inspection, I think I can get some edges in inspection too. And if I predict more edges during inspection, I can track edges a bit better and predict EO more often. Also for PBO, I think my recognition is quite bad. So I need to definitely learn to predict PBO better during EO. A lot of times I get one layer predicted after EO, especially with the easy cases like 1-1. But if I can predict both layers during EO, that can remove that really long PBO pause, which can be really helpful in my solves. I definitely also want to learn how to influence cases better. For example, before I showed how you can influence PBO by doing different EOs and learning multiple EOs for the same case. So I think I can expand on that quite a bit, learn more EO algs, and see if I can avoid those bad PBO cases, which I think is going to be huge. One thing with OBL PBO is you have no control over what OBL and PBO you get, but with my method I think you have a lot of control and you can avoid those bad cases. Another interesting idea I have is doing 2-look solves by doing this. First, do cube shape plus CO, and then 1 look the rest of the solve. So EO plus PBO, 1 look all of that. So that's pretty doable with just knowing how EOs influence PBO. And by tracking the pieces around, you can kind of tell what PBO you're going to get and just not pause. But it still is pretty inefficient. So I think another way you can do it is by doing 2 ALG or 3 ALG PBO plus EO. So for 2 ALG PBO, there's a lot of these cases like SP that are 5 slices that you can reduce the square one into. But there's cases like this for EO as well. There's this case, which is 5 slices, which is NPJ with the 1-1. And let's say you get a case like this. So this is GS, I think. What you can do is notice you can force the N here and then the PJ here. So after doing JJ, you can actually force a 5 slicer. So it's kind of like PBO, but you do it during EO. So you save quite a lot of moves. And maybe if you optimize this well enough, I think maybe the move count of this method might be similar to OBL PBO. I'm not sure though. But there's a lot of 5 slicers for cases like this. Just to list some other examples, you can reduce it to edge, which is the normal 1-1 ALG with 2 edges swapped. You can reduce it to PNF, PNJ, YP, SN, DJ, BJ, AK, JK. Those are a bunch of different PBOs you can reduce into. That are all, I think, 5 or 6 slices from the 1-1 position. So this is a quite hard method. I don't think I'll be learning it anytime soon, but I think it's something that can be explored as an alternative to OBL. And it also gives you 2-look solves, which is actually better than 3-look solves. So maybe this method can be good one day. But it's a lot of ALGs, and as I said before, I don't like learning ALGs. Besides that, another thing that I could explore is learning OBL. Again, I'm not against this method 100%. I still think I might learn it in the future, but I feel like I need some unique touch to it to make it work for me. Maybe if I can predict the bomb layer during inspection, that might make OBL a bit better so I can avoid the pause. Or some partial EO or CO prediction, which is similar to what I use right now. Or maybe have some influencing, that way I can force better OBLs or PBLs. I'm not sure. But I think OBL as it is right now is just a method I'm not too interested in. So yeah, that's my rant. I don't know how long this video is. It's probably really long. But if you stuck to the end, thank you for watching. Hopefully you understand why I'm not learning OBL. And I'll see you in my next video. My next video should hopefully be back in New York, so I'll be back in my normal setup and I'll be making hopefully more videos. Trying to hit 10K this year, and I have some pretty interesting videos coming up hopefully. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching.